A single mother's unexpected journey. It was just another Tuesday for Jenny. The rain tapped gently against her kitchen window as she packed lunches for her 2 kids. Money was tight this month, tighter than usual. The electric bill sat unopened, on the counter, another worry for another time. Jenny had been on her own for 3 years now. After her husband left, she'd pieced together a life from what remained. Her job at the local hospital barely covered rent, but she made it work. She always found a way to make it work. That evening, as darkness fell early the way it does in November, Jenny heard a soft knock at her door. Strange, she thought. She wasn't expecting anyone, and neighbors didn't often visit this late. When she opened the door, she found a small boy standing there, maybe 7 or 8 years old. His clothes were clean but worn, his eyes wide with worry. Behind him, leaning heavily against the porch railing, was an elderly woman who seemed to be struggling to breathe. "Please," the boy said simply. "My grandma's sick, we got lost." Jenny didn't hesitate. As a nursing assistant, her instincts kicked in immediately. She helped the elderly woman to her couch and quickly assessed her condition. Shallow breathing, clammy skin, possible heart problems. "I'm going to call an ambulance," Jenny said, reaching for her phone. "No." The woman's hand shot out with surprising strength. "No hospitals, no doctors. Please, I just need to rest." Jenny was torn. As a healthcare worker, she knew this woman needed medical attention. But there was something in her eyes, a mixture of fear and determination that made Jenny pause. "At least let me help make you comfortable," Jenny offered. "I work at a hospital. I can check your vitals." The boy watched nervously from the corner as Jenny took the woman's pulse and blood pressure using a kit she kept at home. "My name's Lily," the woman finally said. "This is my grandson, Tommy." "We were trying to get to my sister's house," Lily explained between labored breaths. "But we got on the wrong bus. Then it started raining, and my medicine wore off." Jenny's 2 children peered curiously from the hallway. Her daughter Amy, 10 years old and naturally cautious, whispered, "Mom, who are they?" "People who need our help tonight," Jenny answered simply. She made up the guest room for Lily and set up a sleeping bag in her son's room for Tommy. After settling Lily with some tea and her evening medication, which turned out to be for a heart condition, Jenny sat down with Tommy in the kitchen. The boy was quiet, but his eyes took in everything. When Jenny set a plate of leftover pasta in front of him, he waited until she nodded before eating. Slowly at first, then with increasing hunger. "Is your grandma going to be okay?" he asked between bites. "I think so. She mainly needs rest," Jenny assured him, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "Can you tell me where you live? Maybe we can call someone?" Tommy's face clouded. "We don't really live anywhere right now. We were staying at the motel by the highway, but we ran out of money. Grandma's sister is supposed to take us in, but she lives in Greenville." Jenny knew Greenville was almost 60 miles away. How had they ended up here on foot? "My dad was supposed to send money, but he didn't," Tommy continued, looking down at his plate. "He never does." Something in his voice, the matter-of-fact acceptance of disappointment, struck Jenny deeply. It was a tone she recognized from her own children in the early days after their father left. "Well, you're safe here tonight," she said firmly. "We'll figure things out in the morning." Later, after checking on Lily one more time and finding her sleeping soundly, Jenny sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, wondering what she had gotten herself into. Her budget was already stretched to breaking point. She had early shifts for the next 3 days. And now she had 2 strangers in her home. One sick, both clearly in some kind of trouble. But something about Tommy's solemn face and Lily's determined dignity touched her. Maybe because she recognized the look of people trying their hardest against impossible odds. "Mom?" Amy stood in the doorway in her pajamas. "Are they going to stay with us?" "Just for tonight, honey," Jenny said. "They needed help." Amy nodded thoughtfully. "Like when Mrs. Peterson brought us groceries that time when the car broke down?" Jenny smiled, remembering the neighbor who had stepped in during one of her darkest moments. "Yes, exactly like that." "Okay," Amy said simply, and turned back toward her room. Jenny finally went to bed well past midnight, her mind racing with worries and plans. She'd call in a favor with her friend who drove a taxi, see if he could give Lily and Tommy a ride to Greenville. She'd pack them some food for the journey. Maybe she could spare $20 from her emergency fund. She fell asleep making mental calculations, unaware that by this time tomorrow, everything would change. Morning came too, soon, announced by the blaring of her alarm clock. Jenny rushed through her usual routine, checking on Lily first thing. The older woman looked better after a night's rest, her breathing more even, some color back in her cheeks. "I can't thank you enough," Lily said, sitting up in bed. Not many would open their door to strangers these days. Anyone would have done the same, Jenny replied. Though she knew that wasn't true, she made breakfast for everyone, oatmeal stretched with extra water to feed the unexpected guests. Tommy seemed to have come alive overnight, chatting happily with Jenny's son about a video game they both played. Jenny was just clearing the breakfast dishes when she heard it. The sound of a car pulling up outside, doors slamming. Through the kitchen window, she saw a black SUV parked at the curb, its windows tinted dark. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the November morning. Before she could react, there was a sharp knock at the door. Lily's face went pale. "They found us," she whispered, clutching Tommy's shoulder. "Who?" Jenny asked, suddenly afraid. "Who found you?" But before Lily could answer, the knocking came again, more insistent this time. Jenny hesitated, then squared her shoulders. This was her home. Whatever was happening, she would face it head on. She opened the door to find a tall man in an expensive-looking suit standing on her porch. Behind him, another man waited beside the black SUV. "Good morning, ma'am," the man said politely. "My name is Richard Chen. I believe you have my mother and nephew staying with you." Jenny stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing. The man before her looked nothing like Tommy, his pressed suit and confident stance a stark contrast to the lost boy who had appeared on her doorstep last night. "May I come in?" Richard asked, his voice polite but firm. Jenny hesitated, glancing back toward the kitchen where she could see Lily's face tight with worry. Something didn't feel right, but she stepped aside, allowing Richard to enter. "Mom," he said, moving quickly to Lily's side. "We've been looking everywhere for you. Why did you leave like that? And with Tommy?" His tone was concerned, but there was an edge to it that made Jenny uneasy. "I told you why," Lily said quietly, her hand protectively on Tommy's shoulder. "You wouldn't listen." Richard sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "This isn't the place to discuss family matters." He turned to Jenny with a practiced smile. "Thank you for taking them in. It was very kind. I can take it from here." Tommy hadn't said a word since Richard arrived, his earlier cheerfulness gone. He stood pressed against his grandmother's side, eyes fixed on the floor. "Are you okay, Tommy?" Jenny asked gently. Before the boy could answer, Richard cut in. "He's fine. Just embarrassed about all this trouble, aren't you, buddy?" Tommy gave a small nod but still wouldn't look up. "I don't understand," Jenny said, finding her voice. They were trying to get to Greenville to Lily's sister. A flash of something, anger, annoyance, crossed Richard's face before his smooth smile returned. "My mother gets confused sometimes. There is no sister in Greenville. They ran away from my house after we had a disagreement about Tommy's education." "That's not true," Lily said, her voice stronger now. "Richard, tell her the truth." The tension in the room was thick enough to touch. Jenny's children watched wide-eyed from the hallway, sensing the adult's discomfort. "Mom, please," Richard said through a tight smile. "Let's not do this here." He reached for Tommy's hand, but the boy flinched away, moving closer to his grandmother. That small movement made something click in Jenny's mind. She'd seen that reaction before, in patients at the hospital, that instinctive pulling away from someone who had hurt them. "I think," Jenny said carefully, "that we should all sit down and talk properly." Richard's smile disappeared. "That won't be necessary. They're coming home with me now." He turned to Lily. "Mom, I've been patient, but this stops now. Get your things." No, Lily said simply. The room went silent. Even Tommy looked up in surprise at his grandmother's defiance. Excuse me? Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. I said no, Lily repeated, standing straighter despite her frail appearance. You promised you'd stop. You swore to me after the last time, and then I found those bruises on his arm. Jenny's heart sank. Her suspicions confirmed. She moved closer to Tommy and Lily, physically placing herself between them and Richard. I think you should leave, she told Richard, surprised at how steady her voice sounded despite her pounding heart. Richard's face darkened. You have no idea what you're getting involved in. This is a family matter. Not when a child is being hurt, Jenny replied. Then it becomes everyone's business. This is ridiculous, Richard snapped. She's making things up. My mother has been having episodes of confusion. The doctor said, I'm not confused, Lily interrupted. Jenny, he takes the money from Tommy's trust fund, the money his mother left him. He spent almost all of it, that's why we ran. He was going to send Tommy to some boarding school in another state, just to get access to the final payment. Richard stepped forward menacingly. That's enough, Tommy, get your backpack, we're leaving now. Tommy began to tremble, and Jenny saw tears forming in his eyes. No one is going anywhere, Jenny said firmly, reaching for her phone. Not until we sort this out properly. Put the phone down, Richard ordered. This doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern, Jenny replied, her finger hovering over the emergency call button. The standoff might have continued, but suddenly the front door opened again. The second man who had been waiting by the SUV entered without knocking. Everything okay in here, Mr. Chen? We're going to be late for your meeting. The newcomer paused, taking in the tense scene. He was younger than Richard, dressed in a similar, expensive suit, but something in his expression changed when he saw Tommy's frightened face. David, Richard said sharply, wait in the car. But David didn't move. Instead, he looked directly at Lily. Mrs. Chen, is everything all right? Richard turned on him furiously. I told you to wait outside. In that moment of distraction, Jenny pressed the emergency call button on her phone. I'm calling the police, she announced. We can all explain our sides to them. Richard's face contorted with rage. You have no right. Actually, she does, David interrupted, his professional demeanor shifting. And I think the police are a good idea. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Jenny. David Wong, Child Protective Services. I've been investigating Mr. Chen for the past month. The room seemed to spin around Jenny as she tried to process this new information. You're not his employee? David shook his head. I was undercover as his new assistant. We've had reports about Tommy but couldn't get enough evidence. He turned to Richard, who had gone very still. Your mother reaching out for help actually gives us what we need. Richard lunged toward the door, but David was faster, blocking his path. That would be a mistake, Mr. Chen. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. What happened next unfolded in a blur. Police cars arrived, statements were taken, and Richard was escorted away in handcuffs, shouting threats all the way to the police car. David explained to Jenny that they had been building a case against Richard for child abuse and financial exploitation, but hadn't been able to locate Tommy and Lily after they fled. You did the right thing, he told Jenny as officers spoke with Lily in the kitchen. Not everyone would have gotten involved. Tommy sat quietly on the couch, Jenny's children on either side of him like small guards. The boy looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a heavy backpack had been taken from his shoulders. By late afternoon, the house was quiet again. David had arranged for Lily and Tommy to stay in temporary housing until the investigation was complete. Before they left, Lily pressed Jenny's hand between her own. There really is a sister in Greenville, she said with a small smile. And we really will go there once all this is sorted out. I just wanted you to know I wasn't lying about that part. I believe you, Jenny said. And please, stay in touch. Tommy is welcome here anytime. As the official car pulled away with Lily and Tommy inside, Jenny felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that the boy was safe, sadness for what he had endured, anger at Richard, and a quiet pride that she had followed her instincts. That evening, as she made dinner with her children helping in the kitchen, there was another knock at the door. Jenny opened it cautiously, half expecting more drama. Instead, she found David standing there looking much less formal without his suit jacket. "Sorry to bother you again," he said. "But there's something you should know." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for a sum that made Jenny's eyes widen. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "There's a reward program for reports that lead to confirmed cases of child endangerment," David explained. "The department doesn't advertise it widely, but it exists. And in cases involving financial crimes like this one, the reward is calculated as a percentage." Jenny stared at the check. The amount would cover her electric bill, car repairs, and still leave enough to start a small college fund for her kids. "I can't accept this," she said, though her hands trembled as she held the check. "Yes, you can," David said firmly. "You did something most people wouldn't. You got involved when it would have been easier to look the other way. That deserves recognition." After he left, Jenny stood in her doorway for a long time, watching the street where so much had happened in just 24 hours. The check felt heavy in her hand. Not a burden, but a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing, even when it's hard, can change everything. Inside, her children were setting the table, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to wash dishes. The ordinary sounds of family life that suddenly seemed extraordinary. Jenny took a deep breath and closed the door. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. But for tonight, her family was safe. Tommy was safe. And that was enough. As she joined her children in the kitchen, the black SUV that had seemed so threatening that morning now felt like it had been a messenger of a different kind. A reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to unexpected blessings, and that courage comes in many forms, even opening your door to strangers on a rainy night. 3 weeks passed, and life had mostly returned to its normal rhythm for Jenny and her kids. The electric bill was paid, the car finally fixed, and for the first time in years, Jenny slept without the constant weight of financial worry pressing down on her chest. She hadn't heard from Tommy or Lily since they'd left in the CPS car, though David had called once to let her know they were safe, and the case against Richard was proceeding well. Jenny understood that these things took time and privacy, but she often found herself wondering how the boy was doing. It was a Saturday morning when her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize. "Hello?" she answered, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder as she folded laundry. "Jenny?" "It's Lily. Lily Chen." Jenny dropped the shirt she was folding. "Lily, how are you? How's Tommy?" The older woman's voice sounded stronger than Jenny remembered. "We're doing better. Much better. That's partly why I'm calling. I wondered, would it be all right if we stopped by today? Tommy keeps asking about your kids." An hour later, a modest blue sedan pulled into Jenny's driveway. Tommy burst out before the car had fully stopped, looking like a different child from the scared boy who had knocked on her door that rainy night. His face was brighter, his movements more carefree as he ran toward the house. Lily followed more slowly, accompanied by a woman Jenny didn't recognize, tall and gray-haired, with the same determined chin as Lily. "My sister Beth," Lily explained as they reached the porch. "The one from Greenville I told you about." Inside, the children quickly disappeared into the backyard, their voices rising in the easy way of kids who don't need time to remember how to be friends. Over coffee, Lily and Beth filled Jenny in on everything that had happened. Richard was facing serious charges for financial fraud and child endangerment. The investigation had uncovered even more than they suspected: gambling debts, misused company funds, and a pattern of controlling behavior that had isolated Lily from friends and family for years. "That night we came here," Lily said, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "We were desperate. I'd finally gathered the courage to leave after I found out about the boarding school plan. We were heading to Beth's, but Richard canceled my credit cards before we got very far. The motel owner let us stay one night out of pity, but after that, She shook her head. I didn't know where else to go. I'm glad you found us, Jenny said simply. Beth reached across the table to touch Jenny's hand. We all are. Not everyone would have done what you did, standing up to Richard like that. He can be intimidating. It wasn't courage, Jenny admitted. It was instinct. When you're a parent, you just react when a child is in danger. Through the window, they could see Tommy teaching Jenny's son how to do a perfect cartwheel, while her daughter kept score with exaggerated judges' marks. The sight made something warm bloom in Jenny's chest. We have news, Lily said, exchanging a glance with her sister. The court appointed me as Tommy's guardian with Beth as backup. And we're moving to Greenville next week. Beth has plenty of room in her house and there's a good school nearby. That's wonderful, Jenny said, though she felt a small pang at the thought of Tommy moving farther away. We'd like to invite you and your children to visit us, Beth added. Maybe for Thanksgiving? It's a long drive, I know, but we have a guest room and the kids would love it. Before Jenny could answer, the back door burst open and Tommy ran in. Breathless with excitement. Grandma, can we show them the surprise now? He asked, bouncing on his toes. Lily laughed. A free, easy sound that Jenny hadn't heard from her before. I suppose it's time. From her purse, Lily pulled out an envelope and handed it to Jenny. Inside was a brochure for a beachside resort, along with printed confirmation for a week's stay for Jenny and her children. What is this? Jenny asked, confused. David helped us access some of Tommy's trust fund money, Lily explained. The part Richard hadn't gotten to yet. Most of it will be saved for Tommy's college, but we wanted to do something for you first. A vacation? Jenny could hardly believe it. She hadn't taken her kids anywhere beyond the local state park in years. The thought of a week at the beach seemed impossible, like something from someone else's life. You deserve it, Tommy said earnestly. Grandma says you're a hero. Jenny felt her cheeks warm. I'm really not. You are to us, Lily said firmly. Please accept it. It would mean a lot. Outside, Jenny's children had pressed their faces against the window, sensing something exciting was happening. Their hopeful expressions made any further protest impossible. Thank you, she whispered, her vision blurring slightly. We'd love to go. The day continued with a spontaneous barbecue in Jenny's backyard. Beth turned out to be a wizard at the grill, and the kids invented an elaborate game involving water balloons that left them all soaked and laughing. For a few hours, it felt like they were just two ordinary families enjoying a weekend together, the dark circumstances of their meeting temporarily forgotten. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, Jenny found herself sitting, alone with Tommy on the porch steps. The boy seemed lost in thought, watching the fireflies beginning to appear in the gathering dusk. Penny for your thoughts? Jenny asked, bumping his shoulder gently with hers. Tommy looked up at her, his face serious. Do you think my dad will go to jail for a long time? Jenny chose her words carefully. I think he made some bad choices and now he has to face the consequences. But I also think people can change if they really want to. Tommy nodded, considering this. Grandma says sometimes good things come from bad situations, like how we met you because we were running away. She's pretty smart, your grandma. Yeah, Tommy agreed. She also says you don't have to be related to someone to be family. The simple statement caught Jenny off guard. That's true. So maybe, Tommy said hopefully. Even though we're moving to Greenville, we could still be kind of like family. You and Amy and Jake could visit us, and we could visit you, and maybe we could text and stuff. Jenny felt something shift in her heart, a space opening up that she hadn't realized was there. I'd like that very much. Later, as Lily, Beth, and Tommy prepared to leave, promises were made for phone calls, video chats, and the Thanksgiving visit. The children exchanged dramatic, tearful goodbyes as if they were being separated for years instead of weeks. Standing in her driveway, watching the blue sedan until it disappeared around the corner, Jenny reflected on how completely her life had changed because she'd opened her door on a rainy night. One small decision, one moment of kindness, had rippled outward in ways she never could have imagined. That evening, after her children were in bed, Jenny sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Her phone buzzed with a text, a photo from Lily showing Tommy fast asleep in the car, followed by a simple message. "Thank you for giving him back his childhood." The next morning brought another surprise. David's black SUV pulled up outside her house just as Jenny was leaving for work. He emerged carrying a thick folder and wearing a tentative smile. "Sorry to drop by unannounced," he said. "I was in the neighborhood for work and wanted to update you personally." Inside, he explained that Richard had agreed to a plea deal to avoid a public trial. Tommy wouldn't have to testify, and most of the missing money would be recovered. "There's something else," David added, opening the folder. "When we were investigating Richard's finances, we discovered a foundation he created, supposedly for children's education. It was mostly for tax purposes, but it exists legally, with a board of directors and everything." "Okay," Jenny said, not sure where this was going. "The board voted yesterday to remove Richard and restructure the foundation's mission." David slid a document across the table. "They want to provide emergency assistance to families in crisis, specifically single parents, and they're looking for someone to run it." Jenny stared at the paper, not comprehending. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because they asked me to recommend someone," David said, his eyes serious. "Someone who understands both crisis management and compassion. Someone who has lived the struggles these families face." "Me? But I don't have any experience running a foundation. You have life experience that's worth more than an MBA sometimes." He stood to leave. "Just think about it. The salary is twice what you make at the hospital, and the hours would be better for your kids." After he left, Jenny sat for a long time with the paperwork in front of her. The idea seemed absurd, impossible, and yet strangely right. Helping families like hers, being able to make a difference in moments when it mattered most. That night, as she tucked her daughter into bed, Amy asked, "Mom, do you believe in fate?" "I'm not sure," Jenny answered honestly. "Why do you ask?" Amy yawned sleepily. "Because if we hadn't helped Tommy and his grandma, we wouldn't be going to the beach, and you wouldn't have a cool new job, and we wouldn't have new friends. It's like that one night changed everything." Jenny smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "Maybe it's not fate. Maybe it's just what happens when people choose to be kind to each other, even when it's hard." "Well, I like it," Amy declared, her eyes drifting closed. "Our life is more interesting now." Jenny kissed her goodnight, thinking about the black SUV that had seemed so threatening the morning it appeared outside her house. How strange that it had become a symbol not of fear but of possibilities, of doors opening rather than closing. As she turned out the light, Jenny realized Amy was right. Their life was more interesting now, fuller, richer, with new connections that stretched beyond the walls of their small house. All because on a rainy night, when a lost boy knocked on her door, she had chosen to answer. 6 months later, the Foundation office buzzed with activity. Jenny sat at her desk surrounded by stacks of applications from families needing help. Each folder told a story: medical bills that had wiped out savings, cars that had broken down at the worst possible, moment childcare that had fallen through during critical job interviews. In the beginning, Jenny had doubted herself daily. What did she know about running a foundation? But it turned out that her years of stretching dollars as a single mom had prepared her perfectly for this role. She knew exactly what kind of help made a real difference in a crisis because she had lived it herself. "There's someone here to see you," called Patty, the retired school secretary who now worked the front desk 3 days a week. "Says she doesn't have an appointment." Jenny looked up to see a young woman standing in the doorway, clutching the hand of a small child who couldn't have been more than 4. The woman's eyes held that particular mix of exhaustion and determination Jenny had come to recognize, the look of someone who had run out of options but refused to give up. "Come in," Jenny said warmly, clearing a space on the chair across from her desk. "I'm Jenny." "I'm Diane," the woman said hesitantly. "I saw your flyer at the community center. I wasn't sure." "You're in exactly the right place," Jenny assured her. "Why don't you tell me what's going on?" As Diane's story unfolded, an abusive relationship she'd fled with only the clothes they could carry, a promised job that had fallen through, nights spent sleeping in her car, Jenny took notes, already, mentally sorting through the resources they could offer. "We can help," she said when Diane finished. First with a safe place to stay, then with the job situation. The relief on Diane's face made all the late nights and learning curves of the past 6 months worth it. "Thank you," Diane whispered, tears forming. "I didn't know what else to do." "I understand," Jenny said. "I've been where you are. Not exactly the same situation, but I know what it's like when it feels like there's no way forward." After arranging emergency housing and setting up a follow-up appointment, Jenny walked Diane and her daughter to the door. The little girl turned back suddenly and wrapped her arms around Jenny's legs in a fierce hug. "Sometimes the smallest thank you is the biggest one," Patty observed with a smile after they'd left. Jenny nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Moments like these still caught her by surprise. The raw gratitude, the connection, the feeling that she was exactly where she was meant to be. That evening, driving home through the golden light of early summer, Jenny's phone rang through the car speakers. It was Lily calling for their weekly chat. "How's my favorite foundation director?" Lily's voice filled the car. Jenny laughed. "Busy. How's my favorite retired troublemaker?" In Greenville, Lily had blossomed. Free from Richard's control, she'd reconnected with old friends, joined a book club, and even started teaching a pottery class at the senior center. The heart condition that had seemed so dire that rainy night was now managed with proper medication and regular checkups. "We're all packed for your visit this weekend," Lily said. "Tommy's been counting down the days. He's got the whole weekend planned out. The lake, the ice cream place, something about a secret fort in the woods." "The kids can't wait either," Jenny replied. These monthly visits had become a highlight for all of them. Amy's been practicing a new song on her guitar to show Tommy. After they hung up, Jenny pulled into her driveway, smiling at the sight of her little house. She'd considered moving when the foundation job came through. They could afford something bigger now, but in the end, they'd decided to stay. This house, with its creaky porch steps and slightly sloping floors, had become more than just walls and a roof. It was where their new life had begun. Inside, the house was unusually quiet. "Kids," she called, setting down her bag. "Out back," her son's voice answered. Jenny walked through to the backyard and stopped in surprise. A small group of people stood, gathered around a picnic table decorated with streamers and a homemade banner reading, "1-year anniversary." "Surprise," everyone shouted. Jenny stared in confusion until she realized it was exactly 1 year since the night Tommy and Lily had knocked on their door. David was there with his girlfriend, Patty from the office, Beth, who must have driven down from Greenville, and most surprisingly, Tommy and Lily themselves. "What is happening?" Jenny laughed as her children ran to hug her. "It was Tommy's idea," Amy explained excitedly. "He wanted to celebrate the night that changed everything." "We've been planning it for weeks," her son added proudly. "David picked up Lily and Tommy this morning while you were at work." Tommy stepped forward, suddenly looking shy. "I hope it's okay. I wanted to surprise you." "It's more than okay," Jenny said, hugging him tightly. At 10 years old, he was growing taller every time she saw him, but he still fit perfectly in her arms. "I can't believe you remembered the exact date." "How could I forget?" Tommy said seriously. "It was the most important night of my life." The evening unfolded like something from a dream. They ate barbecue and homemade sides that everyone had contributed. David, it turned out, made amazing cornbread. Patty brought her famous potato salad. Beth had driven 4 hours with Lily's apple pie carefully balanced on her lap. As twilight settled over the yard, strung with fairy lights that the kids had hung from the trees, Jenny found herself sitting with Lily on the porch steps, the same spot where she'd sat with Tommy all those months ago. "Look at them all," Lily said softly, gesturing toward the yard where Tommy was teaching Jenny's kids some complicated clapping game while the adults chatted around the table. "A year ago, none of us knew each other. Now look at us." A whole little community, Jenny agreed. Family, Lily corrected gently. That's what Tommy calls all of you. His second family. The word settled over Jenny like a warm blanket. Family. Not just her and her two children anymore, but this wonderful, weird, cobbled-together group of people who had entered each other's lives through crisis but stayed because of choice. Hey, come look at this, David called from the driveway. Everyone gathered as he pointed to the night sky where a meteor shower had just begun, streaks of light flashing across the darkness. Make a wish, Amy shouted, and they all fell silent, faces tilted upward. Jenny closed her eyes but found she didn't know what to wish for. Her life, which had once seemed so limited, so defined by struggle and just getting by, now felt full of possibilities. The foundation was growing, helping more families every month. Her children were thriving. She had friends, real friends, who showed up not just in emergencies but on ordinary Tuesday nights with takeout and bad movies. She opened her eyes to find Tommy watching her. "Did you make a wish?" he asked. "I couldn't think of anything I need," she admitted. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Me neither. Grandma says that's how you know you're right where you're supposed to be." Later, after the guests had gone and the kids were in bed, Jenny sat alone on her porch, replaying the evening in her mind. The surprise party had been perfect, not because of fancy decorations or expensive gifts, but because it celebrated something real and true, that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best beginnings. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Found something interesting in the Foundation archives today. Old article about Richard's grandfather. The original family money came from him helping a single mother during the Depression. History repeats in strange ways. Thought you'd appreciate the irony." Jenny smiled at the message. The circle of kindness, coming back around after all these years. Another text came through, this one from Lily. "Thank you for opening your door that night. You saved us in more ways than you know." Jenny typed back. "You saved me too." And it was true. Before Tommy and Lily knocked on her door that rainy night, Jenny had been getting by, head down, just trying to make it through each day. Now she lived with her head up, eyes open to possibilities she never would have imagined. She thought about all the doors in life, the ones we open, the ones we close, the ones that appear when we least expect them. That night a year ago, opening her front door had seemed like such a small action. She couldn't have known it was actually a threshold to a different life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. There would be more families needing help at the foundation, bills to pay, everyday problems to solve. But now Jenny faced each day knowing she wasn't alone. From inside the house came the soft sound of her daughter talking in her sleep, something she did when she was especially excited. Probably dreaming about the weekend trip to Greenville, about swimming in the lake with Tommy and eating Beth's famous pancakes. Jenny looked up at the night sky where occasional meteors still streaked across the darkness. She hadn't made a wish earlier, but she made one now, not for herself but for someone else. Somewhere in the city tonight, there might be another family in crisis, another mother at her breaking point. Jenny wished for them what she had found: the courage to knock on a door, the kindness of someone opening it. As she finally went inside, locking up for the night, Jenny paused with her hand on the doorknob. Just an ordinary door, just a simple piece of wood. And yet, a year ago, opening, it had changed everything. She thought of the black SUV that had once seemed so threatening in her driveway. How strange that something that had filled her with such fear had turned out to be the vehicle that delivered the next chapter of her life. Jenny turned off the porch light and went to bed, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, she was ready to open whatever new doors might appear, ready to step through them with the same courage that had carried her this far. 3 years had passed since that rainy night when Tommy and Lily first appeared on Jenny's doorstep. The foundation had grown, beyond anyone's expectations, now operating in 3 counties with a staff of 12. What had started as emergency assistance for single parents had expanded to include job training, affordable housing initiatives, and even a scholarship program. On this particular morning, Jenny stood in the conference room of their new office building, pinning photos to a large display board. Each image told a story: families who had received help, volunteers who had given their time, community partners who had joined their mission. "Looks good," David said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, studying the display. "Hard to believe how far we've come." Jenny nodded, taking the coffee gratefully. David had left his government job last year to join the foundation full-time as their legal counsel. The decision had surprised everyone except Lily, who claimed she'd seen it coming all along. "The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, he reminded her. Nervous. "A little," Jenny admitted. Today they would present their most ambitious plan yet, expanding the foundation's reach statewide. It meant more fundraising, more staff, more responsibility. "You've got this," David said confidently. "They trust you. We all do." Their conversation was interrupted by Jenny's phone ringing. It was Tommy, now 13 and in the midst of what Lily called his growth spurt of doom. He'd grown 4 inches in the past year alone. "Jenny!" His voice cracked with excitement. "Guess what? I got the lead in the school play." "That's amazing," Jenny exclaimed, genuine pride warming her voice. "Which play?" "It's an original one our teacher wrote, about a kid who gets separated from his family and has to find his way back home. Kind of like my story, except with music and dance numbers." Jenny smiled at the irony. "You're perfect for that role. No one will have to explain method acting to you. Will you come see it? It's in November, right before Thanksgiving. I know it's a long drive, but we wouldn't miss it for the world," Jenny assured him. "We'll make a whole weekend of it." After they hung up, David raised an eyebrow. "Another trip to Greenville?" "The boy got the lead in the school play," Jenny said, as if that explained everything. And to her it did. The foundation's board meeting went better than expected. The expansion plan was approved unanimously, with several members offering additional resources and connections. As the room emptied, the board chair lingered. "Jenny, a word?" she asked. Patricia Williams was a formidable woman in her 60s, who had built a successful business empire before turning her attention to philanthropy. Her approval wasn't easily earned, but once given, it was unwavering. "That was quite a presentation," Patricia said, "particularly the personal stories. You have a gift for making people see the human beings behind the statistics." "That's because I was one of those statistics once," Jenny replied honestly. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "Which brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss with you. How much do you know about the governor's new task force on family support services?" "Not much," Jenny admitted. "Just what I've read in the news. They're looking for someone to represent nonprofit organizations, someone with both lived experience and professional expertise." Patricia fixed her with a direct gaze. "I've recommended you." Jenny's mouth fell open. "Me? But that's a state-level appointment. Surely there are people with more experience." "Experience comes in many forms," Patricia interrupted. "You've lived through poverty as a single parent. You've built this foundation from practically nothing. And most importantly, you haven't forgotten what it feels like to be on the other side of the desk asking for help." Before Jenny could respond, Patricia handed her a business card. "The governor's chief of staff. She's expecting your call." The rest of the day passed in a blur as Jenny tried to absorb this unexpected development. By the time she headed home, the early autumn sunset was painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. As she pulled into her driveway, Jenny noticed her daughter sitting on the porch steps, guitar in hand. At 13, Amy was growing into a thoughtful teenager with a passion for music and a quiet strength that sometimes caught Jenny by surprise. "Everything okay?" Jenny asked, settling beside her. Amy strummed a few chords before answering. "I got assigned a project at school today. We have to interview someone who changed our life and write an essay about it." "Sounds interesting. Who are you thinking of interviewing?" Amy looked up, her eyes serious. "I want to interview Tommy and Lily about that night they came here and everything that happened after. Is that okay?" Jenny considered this. "I think they'd be honored," But why them? Because, Amy said simply, they're the reason everything changed. Before they came, we were just getting by. Now we're really living. The wisdom in her daughter's observation left Jenny momentarily speechless. It was true. Before that night, their lives had been defined by what they lacked. Now, despite busier schedules and new challenges, there was a richness to their existence that had nothing to do with money. Later that evening, as Jenny prepared dinner, her son burst into the kitchen, laptop in hand. At 15, he developed an interest in filmmaking, constantly documenting family events with an old camera David had given him. "Mom, look what I found," he exclaimed, placing the computer on the counter. "I was going through old files for a school project, and I found this." On screen was a video he'd taken 3 years ago at that surprise anniversary party in their backyard. Jenny watched, transfixed, as the camera panned across faces now so familiar to her. David, Patty, Beth, Lily, and Tommy. They were all younger, of course, but the most striking difference was in herself. "You look different," her son said, echoing her thoughts. "It was only 3 years ago," Jenny protested with a laugh. "No, I mean you look different," he insisted. "Like, inside different. Look at your eyes." Jenny looked closer and understood what he meant. The woman in the video was happy. Yes, but there was still a wariness in her eyes, a tension in her shoulders. The habitual posture of someone who expected life to be hard. "You stand taller now," her son observed, "like you're not afraid anymore." That night, after the kids were in bed, Jenny sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and Patricia's business card. The governor's task force was an incredible opportunity, but it would mean more responsibilities, more time away from home. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Tommy told me about the play. He's over the moon that you'll be coming. Says it won't be real until you see it." Jenny smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. He's come so far." Lily's response came quickly. "We all have. Because of you." "Not because of me," Jenny wrote. "Because we found each other." She set down her phone, thinking about the strange, winding path that had led her here. If someone had told her 3 years ago that she would be running a foundation, being considered for a governor's task force and part of an extended chosen family that spanned counties, she would have thought they were crazy. And yet, here she was. Jenny picked up Patricia's card again, running her finger along the embossed edge. Maybe this was the next door opening. Maybe this was another opportunity to turn her own struggles into something that could help others. The following weekend, Jenny drove to Greenville for their monthly visit. These trips had become sacred time, a chance to reconnect, to remember the bonds that had formed in crisis, but grown in joy. As she pulled up to Beth's charming farmhouse, Tommy raced out to meet her, all gangly limbs and boundless energy. Behind him came Lily, moving more slowly these days, but with a brightness in her eyes that hadn't dimmed. "You're here!" Tommy exclaimed, hugging her tightly. "I'm here," Jenny agreed, suddenly overwhelmed by how right it felt to be with these people who had started as strangers and become so much more. That evening, after a dinner filled with laughter and updates, they gathered on Beth's wraparound porch. The October air was crisp, but blankets and hot cider kept them warm as they watched the sunset over the rolling hills. "I have news," Jenny said during a lull in the conversation. She told them about the foundation's expansion plans and Patricia's unexpected recommendation, the governor's task force. Beth whistled low. "That's impressive." "It's intimidating," Jenny corrected. "I'm not sure I'm qualified." "That's exactly why you're perfect for it," Lily said firmly. "You question whether you belong in those rooms, full of power and privilege. That humility is what makes you effective." Tommy, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Remember what you told me when I was afraid to try out for the school play? You said sometimes the most important thing is just showing up and being willing to try." Jenny smiled at having her own words reflected back to her. "When did you get so wise?" "I had good teachers," Tommy replied with a grin. Later, After the others had gone inside, Jenny remained on the porch with Lily. The night had turned cold, stars appearing in a clear sky above the silhouettes of pine trees. "I've been thinking a lot about that night," Lily said softly. "How close we came to not knocking on your door." Jenny turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "We walked past 3 other houses before yours," Lily admitted. "I almost didn't have the courage to knock at all. But then I saw the small toys on your porch and the welcome mat, even though it was worn out. Something told me if anyone would help us, it would be the person who lived there." The revelation stunned Jenny. 3 other houses, 3 other doors that might have opened or remained closed, 3 other possible versions of their story. "I've never told you this," Jenny said after a moment. "But the night you knocked, I almost didn't answer. It was late, I was tired, and I'd learned to be cautious. Something made me open that door anyway." They sat with this knowledge, the weight of how easily their paths might not have crossed. "Life turns on such small moments, doesn't it?" Lily mused. "A knock, an answer, a choice to help or turn away." Jenny nodded, thinking of all that had flowed from that single moment. The foundation, the families they'd helped, the community they'd built, the lives changed, including their own. Inside the house, they could hear laughter as the kids and Beth played some card game at the kitchen table. The sound drifted out to them like music, the soundtrack of a family that had been formed not by blood but by choice, by courage, by the simple world-changing act of opening a door when someone knocked. "I think I will call about that task force position," Jenny said finally. "Someone needs to be in those rooms speaking for families like mine was, like Tommy's was." "Good," Lily said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Open that door too." As they sat together under the stars, Jenny thought about the black SUV that had once appeared in her driveway, bringing fear and uncertainty. How strange that something that had seemed so threatening had ultimately delivered so many blessings. Not just once, but again and again, as each new door opened onto possibilities she never could have imagined. Some people might call it fate or destiny, but Jenny preferred to think of it as the natural result of courage meeting kindness, the amazing things that can happen when, despite fear and uncertainty, we choose to open the door when someone knocks.